I'm about to say something that might get me cancelled. Some debt is actually good. Dave Ramsey fans are already typing angry comments. But here's the thing. Telling someone all debt is bad is like telling someone all food is bad. Technically, you could survive without it, but you're making life way harder than it needs to be. Today we're covering the actual math behind what makes debt good or bad, because it's not about the debt itself, it's about what you get in return, and whether you can do basic arithmetic. Welcome back to Capital and Capybaras. Let's establish the framework. Debt isn't inherently good or bad, it's a tool, like a chainsaw. Very useful for certain jobs, very bad for making breakfast. The question isn't, should I avoid debt? The question is, does this debt create more value than it costs? That's it. That's the entire framework. If borrowing money at 5% helps you earn 10%, that's good debt. If borrowing money at 20% helps you buy a jet ski, you'll use twice. Well, enjoy your expensive garage ornament. Here's where most financial advice fails you. They either say all debt is sinful or leverage creates wealth. Both are true in specific contexts and catastrophically wrong in others. Let's break down the actual categories. Good debt has 3 characteristics. It funds something that increases in value or generates income. It has a relatively low interest rate, and the thing you're buying actually appreciates faster than the interest you're paying. The classic example is a mortgage. You borrow money at 6 or 7% to buy a house that historically appreciates at 3 to 4%, while providing a place to live that you'd otherwise pay rent for. Over 30 years, you end up owning an asset instead of a folder of rent receipts. Notice, I said historically appreciates. If you bought a house in 2006 at the peak of the housing bubble with a negative amortization interest-only adjustable rate mortgage, that was not good debt. That was good debt's evil twin wearing a disguise. Context matters. A mortgage in a stable market with a fixed rate and a reasonable down payment, generally good debt. A mortgage for a house you can barely afford in a bubble market with creative financing. Financial self-harm. Second example of potentially good debt. Student loans for a degree that increases your earning potential. Key phrase, increases your earning potential. An engineering degree that costs $60,000 but raises your lifetime earnings by $500,000. Good debt. A graduate degree in 18th century French poetry that costs $100,000 and qualifies you to teach 18th century French poetry to people who will also not be able to pay their loans. Mathematically questionable. The degree itself isn't the issue, the return on investment is the issue. Third category, business loans for ventures with clear revenue potential. Borrowing $50,000 to buy equipment that generates $100,000 in annual revenue. That's using debt as a lever. Borrowing $50,000 for a dropshipping business you saw in a TikTok ad. That's using debt as a shovel to dig your own financial grave. Now let's talk about bad debt. And oh, there's so much bad debt. Credit card debt is the poster child. The average credit card interest rate is over 20%. That means if you carry a $1,000 balance, you're paying $200 a year for the privilege of having borrowed that money. There is almost nothing you can buy with a credit card that appreciates at 20% annually. Certainly not the DoorDash orders and Amazon impulse purchases that make up most credit card debt. Car loans are usually bad debt, though people hate hearing this. A car loses 20% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot, then continues depreciating every year. Financing a depreciating asset at 6 to 8% interest while it loses value, that's paying for the privilege of owning something worth less tomorrow. The only exception is if you genuinely need the car to generate income, driving for work, delivery services, or living in a place where not having a car means not having a job. In those cases, it's a tool, not a toy. Payday loans are the final boss of bad debt. We're talking 300 to 400% APR in some cases. These exist to trap people in cycles they can never escape. If you're considering a payday loan, literally any other option is better. Sell something, borrow from family, negotiate with whoever you owe money to, skip meals if you have to. Payday loans are financial quicksand designed to look like a life raft. And let's address the debt people take on for experiences. Financing a vacation, putting a wedding on credit cards, taking out loans for concerts or festivals. Here's the brutal truth. Memories are great, but the memory of how you still owe $4,000 for a trip to Cancun 3 years later? That memory sucks. If you can't pay cash for experiences, you can't afford the experience. Period. Some debt exists in the gray zone. Student loans are the most common example. They can be good debt or terrible debt depending entirely on what you study, where you study, and what you do with it. State school computer science with $30,000 in loans? Probably fine. Private art school with $150,000 in loans? You'd better be exceptionally talented and extremely lucky. The math either works or it doesn't, and follow your passion doesn't pay minimum loan payments. Home equity loans and HELOCs exist in the grey zone too, using your home equity to fund renovations that increase the home's value. Potentially smart. Using your home equity to consolidate credit card debt, you then run back up again. You've just converted unsecured debt to secured debt and put your house at risk. Same tool, very different outcomes based on behavior. And here's an uncomfortable truth. Leverage for investing is the "it depends" zone that wrecks the most sophisticated people. Borrowing to invest in the stock market can work phenomenally well in bull markets. In bear markets, it creates margin calls that force you to sell at the worst possible time. The people who got rich with leverage survivorship biased you into thinking it's a strategy. The people who got destroyed aren't around to post about it. Let's do the math that actually matters. For any debt decision, ask 3 questions. First, what is the interest rate? Below 5% is cheap money. 5 to 10% is moderate. Above 10%, this debt better be doing something very valuable for you. Above 20%, you're probably getting ripped off. Second question, what is the expected return on whatever you're buying? A house might appreciate 3 to 4% while providing shelter. A degree might increase lifetime earnings by a calculable amount. A car depreciates. A vacation provides 0 financial return. A business loan should generate revenue exceeding its cost. Third question, what happens if things go wrong? If you lose your job, can you still make the mortgage payment? If the business fails, do you have a backup plan? If the degree doesn't lead to a high-paying job, can you still service the debt? The downside scenario matters as much as the upside. Good debt looks good, even when things go wrong. Bad debt becomes catastrophic when things go wrong. Here's a formula I actually use. If the interest rate is less than the expected return, and you can survive the payments even in a bad scenario, and the asset or skill has lasting value, it's probably good debt. If any of those conditions fails, walk away or find another way. So, what does this mean for you, specifically? If you have high-interest debt right now, pay it off before doing anything else. Every dollar toward 22% credit card debt is a guaranteed 22% return. You can't beat that in the stock market consistently. If you have low-interest debt with a high-return investment opportunity, paying minimums while investing the difference can make mathematical sense, but only if your psychology can handle it. If you're considering taking on new debt, run it through the framework. Mortgage for a house you can afford in a stable market, usually fine. Student loan for a high-return degree at a reasonable cost, probably fine. Car loan for a reasonable vehicle because you need transportation for work, acceptable. Credit card for that thing you want but don't need, never. Payday loan for anything, absolutely never. Borrowing to invest, only if you can lose it all and survive. Here's the recap. Debt is a tool, not a moral judgment. Good debt funds appreciating assets or income-generating activities at rates lower than the expected return, with survivable downside scenarios. Bad debt funds depreciating assets or experiences at high interest rates with catastrophic downside scenarios. The math either works or it doesn't. Student loans, mortgages, and business loans can be either depending on the specifics. Credit cards, payday loans, and financing depreciating toys are almost always bad. Before any debt decision, calculate the interest rate, expected return, and worst-case scenario. If all 3 pass, proceed. If anyone fails, find another way. If this framework helps you evaluate your next debt decision, hit subscribe. Next episode, We're getting into your first $1,000 invested. Where to put it, what accounts to use, and why it's less scary than you think. Drop a comment. What's the best or worst debt decision you've ever made? No judgment. We've all bought things we couldn't afford. Share your war stories so others can learn. And if you're currently drowning in high-interest debt, check out episode 2 on emergency funds. Step 1 is always stopping the bleeding. Stay chill, do the math, and remember, chainsaws are useful tools, just not for making breakfast.